Hey everybody, this is Mr. Moffat coming at you. Today we are taking a look at the powers of Congress, the structures of Congress, and the functions of Congress. A lot going on here in topic 2.2 for AP Gov. This video is primarily going to be taking a look at the structure and leadership of the House of Representatives. Now, before we even get into the House of Representatives, we should understand that first off, when we talk about leadership in either of the chamber, political party affiliation is uber important. The way that they organize leadership, the way they organize committees, membership, really is determined on whether or not you are in the majority party or in the minority party. And that's part of why the congressional elections, be it midterm elections or the same year as presidential elections, why those elections are so darn important. It's not just having a majority of votes on key votes dealing with major pieces of legislation. It's dealing with the actual running of the day-to-day operations of Congress that are all determined by either majority or minority party status. So keep that in mind. Now, right now, the majority party in both of the chambers are the Democrats. Now, those are both by very slim margins, but even by the slimmest of margins, even by one member, or even a tiebreaker vote like the Democrats have in the Senate, that is all it takes to become the majority party. So if you are the majority party in either chamber, you're going to be allowed to choose the very top positions, be it Speaker of the House, Senate Majority Leader. You're going to have a majority on every committee that makes up the day-to-day operations of that chamber. Now, how do the top leaders get into those positions? Well, at the beginning of each session, at the beginning of each term of Congress, there is a caucus. Now, we've talked previously about what a caucus is. A caucus is just basically a general meeting or a group of members of Congress. Now, there are many types of caucuses that we talked about previously based on interest and geography and yada, yada, yada. But one of the big caucuses that exists are the party caucuses. And so what happens at the beginning of each term of Congress is that all the Democrats get together in a caucus, and then all the Republicans get together in a caucus based on chamber. So there's a House Democrat caucus, there's a House Republican caucus, there's a Senate Democrat caucus, and then there's a Republican Senate caucus. So if you are talking about being the majority party, then your party's caucus, so this most recent time has been the Democrats, you're going to be in charge of voting amongst your own members to determine that chamber's top leadership positions. Now, if you're the minority party, there are some consolation prizes that go along with that. So, for example, when the House Republicans got together and when the Senate Republicans got together, they also voted amongst themselves to choose the minority party position. So each party will have some type of leadership positions, and they will have obviously representation on committees, but they will always be in the minority position, meaning diminished power in contrast with the majority party in those positions. Okay, so with that being said, we're going to focus primarily on the House of Representatives in this particular video. So let's get into how the leadership of the House of Representatives is set up. And we're going to be starting off first with the Speaker of the House. Now, the Speaker of the House is a position that is mentioned by name in Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution. It is far and away the most powerful position in the House, and arguably the single most powerful position in all of Congress. When we do get to the Senate, there really is no position that's completely equivalent to Speaker of the House in the Senate. For example, there is no position known as Speaker of the Senate. So to be the Speaker of the House, you are in a fairly unique position in terms of not just power within your own chamber, but relative power in contrast with the Senate leadership. So with that being said, who is the current Speaker of the House? Well, I think many of us know who that is. That is Nancy Pelosi, pictured right here. She is a Democrat, obviously majority party, representing the District of San Francisco, California, one of the more liberal districts in the country. Now, Ms. Pelosi is significant for a couple of reasons, but one of those reasons is that she has been and is currently the only female Speaker of the House in U.S. history. So in over 200 years of Speakers of the House, she is the only woman to hold that position, and she's held it twice in two separate iterations. So this is her second time as Speaker of the House. Now, what does it mean to be Speaker of the House? Well, as we said, you're chosen by the fellow members of your party, and you are massively powerful. Now, way back in the day, if you were to go back to the late 1800s, for example, Speakers of the House were almost demigods in terms of their power within that chamber. But the Progressives put in some limitations on the Speaker's power. But even still with those limitations, the Speaker is far away the most powerful person in the chamber, and once again, arguably the most powerful person in the entire legislative branch. Take a look at some of these powers that Nancy Pelosi holds in the position of Speaker of the House. For example, anybody that wants to speak has to have the permission, ultimately, of the Speaker. That's pretty profound. You can't speak unless the Speaker allows you to speak. Now, note, speakers do not use this power in a brutal way, in other words, to prevent the minority from ever saying anything on the chamber floor, but bottom line, the Speaker is going to be responsible for things such as determining how much time each member gets to speak, be it 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever. Any questions about parliamentary procedure, in other words, any questions about the rules of how to operate in the House, that is ultimately determined by the Speaker. Determining who is going to be members of select committees and conference committees, and we'll talk more about that later on. But committees that are specially investigative, like for example, the current January 6th committee that is focused on trying to investigate the January 6th insurrection that took place. The membership of that committee was ultimately chosen by Nancy Pelosi. Now, historically, the Speaker gives the minority party opportunities to choose members, but in this particular case, actually, Nancy Pelosi was of the mindset that the Republican caucus was going to send over people that would not be objective. So she rejected most of the Republican nominees to serve on that committee, only choosing two ultimately, Liz Cheney from Wyoming and Adam Kinzinger from Illinois, who are considered to be not moderates ideologically, but people that are not very sympathetic to the January 6th insurrection movement. Additionally, directing the agenda, directing the business on the floor, setting the agenda, that is all done ultimately by Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House. In other words, what bills are going to be looked at, when they're going to look at it, that's ultimately determined by the Speaker of the House. So bottom line, if you don't have the Speaker's support on legislation, that legislation will never see the light of day on the floor of the chamber. So that is very important. And this kind of speaks to, once again, as I mentioned before, that if you're the minority party in the House, especially, you're really sitting on the sidelines because the Speaker is never going to entertain minority party legislation unless there's some benefit for the majority party. Once again, behind the scenes influence, you're talking about, any key decisions, negotiations that are being done with the other chamber and the Senate, negotiations with the White House. Right now in recent months, Nancy Pelosi has been doing a lot of behind the scenes work in terms of trying to work with the Senate and work with the White House to get both the infrastructure bill passed and the Build Back Better bill passed. So far, not to any success, though. Any committee positions in terms of standing committees, the actual legislative committees, that is also ultimately done through the Speaker's office. So in other words, every majority member of Congress, majority party member of Congress, a member of the House rather, if you want to get on a certain committee, you've got to have the Speaker's blessing. If not, you're not going to be there. And then also, major influence over where bills end up in committee. In other words, you've got all these standing committees that might exist out there, be it maybe appropriations, meaning spending, or ways and means, which is talking about taxation, or it could be anything like agriculture or education or whatever. When a bill comes up, it has to be assigned to a committee, and the Speaker is going to have more influence as to where that bill goes, or in other words, to what committee it goes than anybody else. And that's going to be very important because depending on what committee a bill gets sent to, that can have an effect as to whether or not that bill is ever going to survive or not. And then lastly, the other top legislative leaders in that party. So things like majority leader, majority whip, and other top House majority positions in that chamber, those are also appointed by the Speaker. So bottom line, you cannot be House Majority Leader, you cannot be House Majority Whip unless the Speaker gives you their blessing. So the Speaker of the House is wildly powerful in that chamber. And once again, on the Senate side, the Majority Leader doesn't have these same kinds of powers. So in many respects, you can make a very strong argument that Nancy Pelosi, as the Speaker of the House, is the most powerful position, has the most powerful position in Congress. Now, going along with that, you also have other top positions that include Majority Leader and Majority Whip. The current Majority Leader is Steny Hoyer out of Maryland, as pictured here. Now, to be Majority Leader, you are basically the top assistant to the Speaker of the House. And Steny Hoyer has been that loyal assistant to Nancy Pelosi for many, many years, including being House Majority Leader in the first iteration of the speakership of Nancy Pelosi. So what do? Well, you work with the Speaker to help set up the agenda for the chamber, setting up the priorities of the majority party, in this case right now, the Democrats. You are also the chief representative of the Speaker in terms of, if the Speaker can't be there for negotiations on certain legislation or whatever. So Mr. Hoyer is very, very significant. And for most majority leaders, it is a stepping stone position to someday becoming Speaker of the House. So, you're kind of the number 2 in line. Say, for example, let's say that Nancy Pelosi decides to retire. Steny Hoyer would be, at least on paper, the most likely assumed replacement. Now, that being said, in our current makeup, Steny Hoyer is likely never going to be Speaker of the House unless something really kind of goofy happens. He is up there in years as well, just like Ms. Pelosi. And so I think he's kind of defined his role as being her chief lieutenant, chief advisor, and probably will never become Speaker. But, generally that is a stepping stone position. And then the other top position in the majority party is the position of Majority Whip, which is currently held by this man, Mr. Jim Clyburn. Clyburn is historically significant because he is the only African American in U.S. history to hold the whip position. In fact, to hold the whip position in either chamber. Mr. Clyburn, by being the House Majority Whip, and note this is his second iteration of that position as well, is the highest ranking African American in the history of the U.S. Congress. So our current House leadership has some very historic peoples serving in those positions. But what does it mean to be the whip? Well, the whip is the person that herds the votes together, to organize the votes, mobilize the votes. He is the chief vote counter. So in other words, if you are trying to, get votes in the House, remember you got to get a majority of 435 possible votes. So that magic number is 218. If you can get 218, you win, every legislative battle. And so Clyburn's position is to try to get those 218. Now, generally, of course, it's basically getting members of your own party to organize and coalesce and come together. Rarely does the majority whip try to get votes from the other party, and that's a very hard thing to do anyway. But the main job is to count those votes, organize those votes, tell members of the chamber, especially of the majority party, this is how we're going to vote, this is what the leadership wants to do, this is why they want to do it. And to help you remember, think of the whip as, like that weapon, a whip, whipping members of the majority party, especially into line to get them how to vote a certain way. Okay? Now, we are coming up on 15 minutes, so I'm going to leave it right there. We haven't gotten into the minority leadership just yet, but we will here very soon. So this is the end of part one of many parts, I think, for topic 2.2 for AP Gov. Until next time, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.